So in prison, did you notice anything different about how you were treated by like staff or prisoners compared to others?
I think when you first get there, look, it always shifts, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So when you first get there, you're just some scumbag, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I was A8892DT Atkins, you know, and you're on
Just on
E-wing.
that, sorry, just on that, yeah. The other day I was chatting with my boys, yeah, and I was like, I can't remember my prison number. And then they all said their prison numbers, and I was like, I remember mine now.
Did you
brought
see
it
what
back.
I put on my socials the other day?
No.
So my friend, she used to write to me inside.
Oh, yeah.
And she used to I think she obviously did it from Moonpig. And
Moonpig's good, yeah.
Moonpig emailed her and was like, your friend Jules' birthday A05470Z. And they put it on the email massive 3 big times saying her birthday's coming up, boom, boom, boom. And I was
there's a prison number.
Wow, they're still you're not letting me
Moonpig
run from
remembers.
that. They're
I
still
know.
attached to me. I was like, that's trauma. They need to get rid of that.
I'm not gonna
Moonpig
lie.
knows forever.
That's
I
trauma.
don't think I'll ever forget it now.
Yes, prison number. Sticks
Yeah,
with
it
you.
stays with you.
Well, clearly.
So you had to say it over
Yours has
and
been the
over and over
longest,
again.
surely.
But then I found that because I was just sort of saying yes to everything, because I was trying to get out of my cell, and when they gave me a job, I didn't abuse it. I mean, I maybe made the odd phone call and chatted to some of my mates on the way, but I did the tasks that were asked of me. And then because of that, you could just see you getting a bit more trusted. So they'd say Atkins rather than shout Atkins.
Yeah.
You know, you suddenly found your cell getting opened a little bit earlier or not locked quite as much at night. And then when I moved into, and I call this in the book, the executive suite. So just to explain, in H-wing and Wandsworth, and this is where all the sort of the white middle class people sort of ended up in this one corner. They called it Little Hampstead because that so many of them lived in Hampstead. There's all these rich bankers, and there's one of
Little
them.
Hampstead.
I didn't know this.
Yeah, Little
I
Hampstead.
swear this is not in women's prisons.
Do you not? No. Sorry.
Welcome to men's prisons.
Yeah, this is so
Yeah.
interesting.
And it's wrong because all the sort of discrimination that you have in the outside world is is worse inside. And privilege of money kind of goes a long way. And I always thought it'd be like the armed robbers who are in charge of the wings, but it wasn't. It was the bankers, as in the real world. And this one guy who I call Scott in the book, it's not his real name, but he had been on some massive share fraud, and he'd been in Wandsworth for ages, and he had got this double cell. It was 2 cells knocked through, so it was bigger than this room we're in now. It was like a small studio flat, and I remember first going in, going, "How do I get me in here?" And because he was a listener, he was the head listener. It was seen as a perk for the head listeners. And then one of the other guys got bussed out and I got asked to move in because I was training to be a listener. Yeah. So suddenly I was in this really nice suite base. We called it the executive suite.
We have that in High Point. We call it the penthouse.
Yeah, exactly.
Is this in every prison?
Certain prisons have a big double cell. So
but no, I mean this separation of people
the inequality is terrible.
I've been on wings where the doors are open all day long and it's a certain particular kind of people. So even me being on the wing, I was a bit of riffraff on the wing, and I conduct myself pretty well.
I mean, I see, unjust unfairness happen a lot. Don't get me wrong, but not like that.
Yeah,
I don't think
certain people get certain jobs, certain people get certain roles.
I kind of I get that, but sorry, it's just interesting.
No, it was. You look back now, it's quite shameful, but and I think once I moved in with Scott into the executive suite, I remember so clearly an officer who I'd known pretty much from most of my time there walked in and called me Chris. And it's because I was suddenly in the exec suite with Scott.
First name basis. So then that brings me to my next question. Is white privilege a real thing in prisons?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Next question, because that was really good.
Yeah.
So then what's the difference then? What difference does that make? What difference do you see?
I just think that there's a bias that people have because, unfortunately, a lot of people end up in prison not because they've decided, I'm going to go out one day and commit this really big crime and it goes wrong. I mean, people go there through circumstance. They go because of poverty. They go through inequality. And I think that's only getting worse now, to be honest. And you see, what's the number one crime that everyone's complaining about at the moment? Shoplifting. Yeah. People don't want to be shoplifters. They shoplift mostly because they're starving. Okay. And that, you can see that with the rise in food banks. I think there was 20 food banks 10 years ago. There's now over 1,000. I mean,
crazy.
So, and unfortunately, the people who are most disadvantaged in the outside world are people of ethnic minorities often, and that means that they're more likely to get sucked into criminality, be it through street gangs or county lines or whatever it is, and it happens from a very young age, and then they end up in prison, and that means that they are disproportionately represented within the prison system, and it's not because they are inherently more evil or less evil, it's just because that's the way the unfairness of society on the outside pushes them in. So there's therefore a bias that then carries into the prison system, which is, if you're young and black, you're up to no good.
Yeah.
Fundamentally. And that comes from the black officers as well, I hasten to add.
Yeah.
And I saw that. So, and it just means that, you know, the people who need the most help in the prison system are often the ones least likely to get it.
Well said.
So I got help that I probably didn't need, but there were people who really, really needed that help who were locked in their cell on the fours.
Oh, mate, did you have a wing with 5s?
No, we went from 4 down to 1, but you start at the top and work your way down.
Yeah.
Some people like the 4s because it was as far away from the govs as possible.
I was on a wing with 5 landings. Jesus. Mate, it was at the time one of the biggest wings in Europe.
The noise is
crazy.
Yeah.
If you was on the 5s, you was forgotten. Yeah. Literally. That cell buzzer's pinging off.
Oh, God, yeah.
There ain't no one coming up there. Like,
it's actually just so sad. Like, it's just...
And these are prisons that were designed 150 years ago.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Which we're going to come on to.
Go for it. I'm getting ahead of myself.
No,
that means we're on the right lines of thinking.
We want to kind of like ask you. Yeah. So I just wanted to bring it back to your book for a second. So a bit of a stretch. That's actually made from your own personal prison diary, right? Yeah. So it was described as a must-read insight into why prison simply doesn't work by Jon Snow.
There you go.
Big up Jon Snow.
Where did this idea to write a journal, write a diary come from?
So I think it was always slightly in the air when I went away. A few people said to me like, "Oh, well, you're going to write a book." You know, it was just sort of kind of obvious because I think a lot of people in my world of like media, like film, TV, and books are all kind of the same, you know, ecosystem, to use that dreadful phrase. So it was sort of. And it's like middle class guy goes to prison, writes book. You know, it was like it was the end of a punchline.
It was like written for you.
No, exactly. And someone sent me a text.
You're on fire, Jules.
Sorry.
On fire with the puns.
He's picking me up. I don't even realise I'm doing it, but you know.
Fantastic. And they sent me a text going, "Always keep a diary, and one day it will keep you." Which is a good. Mae West said that.
So where was my friend saying this stuff, bruv? Where were you lot?
Always keep a diary. One day it'll keep you.
I like that.
I had to keep my mouth shut.
What was you going to say?
I was going to say they were in there with me. War friends.
Yeah.
That would have been better.
Well, they were in there with me, yeah.
So, and it was, and also as a documentarian by trade, but I didn't have a camera. So my instinct was to point a camera at what was going on, but I didn't have one. And then the best I could do was a pen and paper. Oh. And it was so mad, the stuff I was witnessing, stuff that you guys now is it would be totally sort of normal and not too shocking because you've been in it. But when you had never been in that world before and you're suddenly thrust into, and not just anywhere, but Wandsworth, it's pretty crazy. Yeah. I was just like, they're never going to remember that. They're never going to leave me back home and I'm never going to remember it. I've got to start making notes. But I didn't have a physical diary as such. I went in with a notebook, but they confiscated it. Because as we all know, you can kill people with notebooks. So Wandsworth reception officers took that.
Wait, are you joking?
Obviously you can make them eat paper.
No, but what was
it? It might have had a metal spine. It might have had a metal
spine. There we go, Chris. Come on.
Sorry, rookie error.
Yeah.
I know that now.
That's really going to make a difference.
Metal spine.
I mean, like the curly ones, not like a piece of metal, but it might have been plastic. Anyway, so they took that. So I then became like a real paper thief. So whenever I was in a room and there was any paper, I just grab some and stick it down my trousers because I didn't have any pockets because you're in prison. Sort of horrible smock
there's
things.
no
pockets.
You know what? Why don't anyone talk about that? We used to talk about that, but have no pockets. People are like, what? Yeah, there's no pockets.
I think maybe because if your hands are in your pockets.
There's no pockets.
But if you had hands in pockets, like officers can't really see what's.
Yeah, but guess what?
What you might be.
Guess what? You're going to answer this.
You still hide stuff anyway.
Yeah,
but people had the hands down the trousers.
Anyway, carry on.
That's a whole other conversation.
With the paper trouser conversation.
Yeah. So I would steal paper left, right and centre and take it back to my cell and then I would just write about what happened that day. Mm-hmm. And the first few weeks it was, I sat on my own in my cell all day. So that's not so exciting. But then once I got these jobs and I got out and I was going about the place, you just got to sort of witness it firsthand. And in journalism and storytelling, the biggest obstacle is access, what we call access.
Yes.
So if I want to write about, I don't know, what's going on in 10 Downing Street now while they're all kind of getting busted for gambling and stuff, I'd love to go in and write that story, but they're not going to let me in because they know I'm going to write about it and make them look like cretins. So therefore I'm going to be denied access. And people try and get access to prisons all the time.
It's the most difficult thing.
It's the most difficult thing. Why? Because they don't want people seeing how mad it really is. So from a journalist point of view, this is the best access I'd ever had in my entire life. And it was just as the prison crisis was really exploding, certainly, in the news and in terms of the overcrowding and violence and everything else. So I was like, God, I'm getting what I always wanted in life, which is being in the middle of a great story. Unfortunately, I've had to go to prison to do it. So I was not short of material in the slightest. And so I just thought, I'm just going to keep a record.
That's proper method documenting.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
Fully immersive.
Yeah, fully immersive. That's what they do with actors. Actors will if they're going to play a homeless man, they'll
go and be homeless.
Yeah. So So is there a documentary coming?
Well, there could be, but because I didn't film any footage. It's very hard to get the camera into the prison. So people always ask me this, and I said, well, I if they'll let me in to film it, I'll film it. They don't want the public to see what it's like because the public would be horrified.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent it would wake up a big section of society to actually what prison is actually like.
But I'd
love to, but
do you think it will wake up the public? And
I think if they saw, the thing for me is it wasn't just that they were horribly outdated and violent and dangerous and all that. It was just that how badly run they were. It was the dysfunction of it. And I often thought that if this was a hospital that was run this badly, it would just be shut. Overnight.
Quickly.
And because someone would get out their phone and they'd film it and they'd post it online, and suddenly everyone would be on the front of the Daily Mail, and the bloody thing would get shut down. The dysfunction, the inefficiency, the futility of the prison system, like people actively doing things that are going to make the situation worse.
Yes,
it's just happening on an industrial scale. And I think if the public really understood that, then they would be properly horrified.
Yeah, because if you understood that if prisons are run properly, if rehabilitation was the focus, then there'd be less spend on the system in general. There'll be less reoffending. Yeah. There'll be more productive members of society.
Exactly.
Things will change. They'll have a bigger impact. There'll be more money to be, more funds to be distributed elsewhere.
Exactly.
And whatnot.
And I think it is more talked about now, a little bit more, but obviously it's in the news a lot now, the overcrowding and stuff like that. But the actual reality of it still isn't out there.
It's a mystery.
And I think, when it is, then hopefully some change will happen, because there's not, we can't go on like forever for that. Like,
well, if the newspapers are to be believed, they're about to burst. Really, like red lights are flashing.
Oh
on the
no, you know what
dashboard.
they're doing as we speak now? Guys are getting 60-day early.
60 days.
60-day early.
Why
couldn't we have that?
Exactly. And what they're doing is they're looking to increase this to 100 days.
Yeah, it's gonna be ridiculous.
Plus, tag is only 4 months. They're now moving that to 6 months.
Yeah, 6 month tag.
Literally, like I've seen from a credible source.
Yeah.
The paperwork being handed out to prisoners saying 6 month tag, 60 days early.
Which just makes a mockery of the sentences.
Well, it just shows you.
It's just like, why just sentence people for less time rather than sentencing for that? So the victims all think, they've got that really long sentence. And then they we're going to have to let them out halfway through that because we haven't got the space.
Or sort out another way of rehabilitating people.
Yeah.
So that
I think the system needs rehabilitation.
Yeah, it's all carrot, no stick. No, the other way around. All stick, no carrot.
All stick, no carrot. That's it.
Okay, so where did the idea come to write a book then from these diaries?
So the diary was happening, and I found it intensely therapeutic, just sort of as a kind of personal expression of just getting all the sort of trauma and all the difficult things that happened to me out of my system. And it was kind of almost like talking to a therapist, except my therapist was the page.
Wow.
And I found that exceptionally helpful. If I'd had a really bad day, or I missed my son, or I'd seen something very traumatic, often the listener suite, writing it about it was kind of like drawing the poison from the wound. So it was sort of happening anyway. And I had a very strong feeling that I was given this opportunity to witness this and to then go back and tell everyone about it, much as you'd see with war reporters. They happen to be on the front line when some terrible atrocity is taking place, be it in Vietnam or whatever, and they come back and they write about it and they publish the photograph to say, no, these awful things are happening and they're happening in your name and you need to do something about it. So I felt that I needed to use that opportunity for some kind of public benefit, because I thought, I'm going to have a voice, I'm going to have a platform in a way that lots of these people here do not. But I'm going to get to tell the stories of how awful life is on the inside, and hopefully it can lead to some kind of social change. So I over the course of it, it went from being a personal therapy exercise, I guess, to me thinking, this has got to be put out there. People really need to know about this. And I was very fortunate. There's a really good book, if people haven't read it, called This Is Gonna Hurt by Adam Kay, who was a junior doctor.
Okay.
And he kept diaries, and he was in the middle of the NHS for several years and watched, how the lack of funding and all the problems the NHS is suffering were impacting patients and the staff there. So he wrote a very, very funny, darkly funny book called This Is Gonna Hurt, and it was a huge bestseller. So that kind of set the mold, really. So publishers were actually looking for more of these books and hidden worlds of people who were in that world saying, look, this is what it's really like. So that kind of created the appetite for it. But I also thought, if I'm just going to go out there and write about violence, suicide, self-harm, drugs overdoses, that's so bleak, it's going to put people off. But I found Wandsworth like darkly funny. I found it a very, very weirdly, but like dystopian humour was sort of a daily occurrence. There was a whole group of Muslims on my wing, and they all joined Alcoholics Anonymous just so they could get out their cells. None of them drank. They're all teetotal. They're Muslims, right? But they all went to AA and got their badges saying hilarious. 6 months sober, and did the 12 steps just so they could get out their cells.
That's hilarious.
And exactly, and this is like every day. There was a mindfulness course. Like, you couldn't get loo roll some days, but you could go on a mindfulness course, of course, in Wandsworth. And the mindfulness course was called tunneling. Okay, so loads of people signed up to this course. Like, do you want to learn tunneling and all this stuff? And it's like,
yeah, tunnel out of here,
tunnel out of here. And they thought that's probably not the best choice of name. So it was just stuff like that. So in amongst all the misery and the gloom and the trauma, there was this very dark humour that pervaded the system. And I thought, well, if I can wrap it up in some humour, that's going to make it more accessible and digestible to the public at large. And you can always sort of soften things with a bit of a joke.
And that is the reality as well. That was the reality. Like, it is dark humour. There are some crazy things that happen inside that are,
as we're going to learn from your podcast, Crazy.
Crazy.
Okay, crazy
Stay
women's
tuned.
prisons.
Stay tuned for that one.
But we lived it, like, there are some funny things that happen.
Listen,
in a really weird way.
Towers? Do you ever watch Fawlty Towers?
Yeah.
It was like Fawlty Towers in my prison. It was just every day there was something. Like that.
And to be fair, if you're not laughing, you're going to be crying.
Exactly.
Every single day there's something unusual that happens in there.
Gotta laugh. We made each other laugh in there. Why not?
And I found that madness kept you going, and it also made the time go quite quick.
When there was always something happening, times you're like, "Bro, was that 2 weeks ago?"
Yeah, I know.
Like, and you know what I'm saying? It makes time. It does. Time
it was
does
so lively, and I'm not. This sounds like I miss it. I don't. But I remember getting to open, and then time slowed down. Like, because the worst thing that happened in open prison was Survey ran out of chips. Or
we got to go back to the kitchen and get more chips.
Or we lost a football or something like that. And in, I get my cell open in the morning and the officers would come in and go, oh, guess who tried to stab a screw last night? Oh, we had a tornado team on D-Wing, and oh God, then the fire alarm went off and someone jumped the netting. And that's before breakfast, you know. And it was just like, oh God, that's, a bit of gossip.
Yeah.
And then I get my pen out and go, write it all down.
No, that's true. That's good. That's good. If you're listening in prison, start your diaries now.
Yeah. Write it all down.
Start them now. Jules, you got one as well, innit? I'm going to hot Jules up.
He always does this. To be fair, when listening to you for your reasons why you did one, I had no idea why I started to write a diary. But I think it was mainly because same thing, like I felt like I needed to express what was going on so it wasn't just like in my head. And then as the days went on, I found therapy in how many days I had done. So it was like day one. And then I had the same time as you. I got 5 years, so I did 2.5.
Yeah.
And it ended up being day 900 or something like that.
911, I think it was.
That's it.
Yeah.
Day 911.
No, it's
that's so weird because that number keeps popping up to me. Sorry, I just had to say that because that's weird.
Yeah, but I knew the maths of all that, the 10%, the 15%.
Okay,
Right.
you did it all.
So,
exactly.
And then in the end, it was just, it just happened and it was just every day. It just felt good. As you said, like some days were super boring and I would just write nothing. And I would just say, nothing to say. But some days it would be like just keep going. And
I did pages of it.
I have no idea what is in this diary because I haven't read back.
Oh God, you should go and get it out.
I really shouldn't. Zach keeps saying to me,
Go
and get it out.
Come read it out now.
I'd love to be a producer on that
also,
Netflix special.
Not saying embarrassed, but like these are they're so personal. These are my exact emotions, my exact feelings. Like,
Jules will make sure you're well paid for it. Yeah.
But I found that a lot of the trauma and the upset of going to prison was about shame. And I found actually that by putting it all out into the open kind of dissolved the shame away. Because it's like, I've just put it all out here now. There's nothing negative you can say about me that I haven't said about myself. And I'm putting it out there for you all to like pick apart and do whatever you want. And the relief you get, because it's like, it's all done now. It's all out there.
You're giving me like inspiration to actually go back and read it. But I do remember reading like day 1 and day 2 I think it was a year or so ago. Yeah. And that's all I did. But I was very open about, not showering because I didn't know how to do it. Like I didn't know the process or anything like that.
Amongst friends, we've not showered for days inside. It's like,
No, on day 1 I didn't. Like
have you ever showered in your socks?
God, I don't remember that.
Men are underwear for
Men's prisons are grimy. You don't want to touch your
I had sliders.
Flip-flops.
Always.
Till you get your sliders or your flip-flops.
Why did I have sliders? I had sliders.
Well done. You was prepared.
Yeah, well, I knew I was going to prison.
That's one thing I took.
Yeah, well done. But we spoke about DCAT earlier. You spoke about open prison.
Could I just finish one thing about, what you're saying about writing and stuff. So one of the things that we've done is, because I do this books campaign called Bang Up Books, where we get books donated by publishers, new books donated by publishers, and we send them to prisons. We've been doing it for 4 years now. We've done over 150,000 books.
Wow.
It's called Bang Up Books. So most of the people listening to this are in a prison with our books on your shelves. They don't come with stamps because it just wastes too much time. We just send like hundreds of books to prisons each week. And one of the things that we're going to do now is we're going to do an anthology. We've got major publishers on board who are going to publish an anthology of prison writing from anyone and everyone in the system.
Wow.
Even if you've just come out, you can do it. Or even if you're a family member of a prisoner, you can submit. And we're going to take any kind of writing, short stories, diaries, poetry, rap lyrics. Because we know that grime lyrics really bad. It can be an essay on why you hate the prison system so much. It can be a food recipe. It can be anything. We just want people to put pen to paper. We're going to collate them all. We're going to give feedback. The best ones are going to be published. They'll get a bit of money for being published.
Wow.
And it's going to happen. It's going to go in bookshops and it's going to be out everywhere. And it's going to be called Once Upon a Time.
Did you know Jules' representation here?
Yeah, really?
She has a diary,
Well, that's what I was saying. I think you should submit, or just a couple of pages.
This is such a lovely idea, by the way, because so many people have so much to express.
Yes.
And through so many different forms.
Any form.
And I think it's a chance for people to feel heard.
Yes.
In such a place where you're not. So I think...
And prisoners are silenced. And I think as well, one of the problems is that the public at large see prisoners as just voiceless zombies off their head on spice. And they're not, they're human beings. And I think by using the written word, people on the outside reading this can see prisoners for just being people, the people that they are, and kind of showcasing the talent really that's within inside the prison walls. So
I love
it's a big
this,
thing.
Chris.
That's sick.
So people can look it up. We're going to launch it in a few weeks, but I thought I'd give you the scoop today.
Yeah, please.
Exclusive.
And tell us tell people where they can find it.
If they speak to their learning managers, it's going to be called Once Upon a Time is the name of the project. So if you speak to your learning manager or someone in the library, they're going to know about it and they'll tell you how you can submit.
Love that.
Perfect.
So then talking about your podcast, how does that differ from your book?
The book's my story. The podcast is other people's stories. And it's weird. I wanted to do a documentary. When I got out, I had all these names and numbers of people who I'd met inside, and just so I could stay in touch with them, really. I thought they had fantastic stories and they're really good characters. Actually, in some cases, it was their mums. They gave me their mum's number.
Yeah.
Because obviously they changed their own name for a bit. So I had like 15 drug dealers' mothers, which I thought is always like a Channel 5 series, isn't it? Drug dealers' mums.
Drug dealers' mums.
There you go.
You've got prisoners' wives.
Exactly. Why not? That's the next logical step.
Drug dealers' mums.
I got in touch with a whole bunch of people when I got out, and I said, look, I want to do a documentary. And they all said no because they didn't want to be filmed.
Okay.
We were talking about this before.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, well, that's that idea up in smoke. But then I started listening to a fantastic podcast called Ear Hustle. Which I'm sure you've listened to.
We've had them on. They're friends of the podcast.
We had them come down.
They were our first
Was it last year?
They were our first guests.
Oh, I'm such a fan. So I listened to that. And because podcasts had really taken off while I was inside, I was just suddenly, I was just listening to it. I was so inspired by it. And I thought, oh, well, I'll just do that. I'll just do a podcast. So I went back to all my friends and said, look, let's say I don't film you and I just record your voice, change your name. We won't get into details about your crime, but I want your story to be real and your voice to be real. But, so maybe if your mum hears it, she'll know it's you, but no one else will. They were like, yeah, that's fine. Exactly. They all have stories to tell, their things they want to say. So I just recorded loads and loads of these interviews and edited them together to make a bit of a stretch of the podcast.
That's sick.
Yeah.
So it's me
That is
chatting
really cool.
to other ex-cons about life inside. And that's now evolved, and I've got a third season that I'm working on right now.
Boom. When's that due?
In a month, July.
Love that. Look out for that. A bit of a stretch podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe you might have some guests called Zak and Jules on there.
Oh yeah, well,
Hey!
You know what I'm saying?
I love that.
So, Chris, is there anything else you're up to at the minute?
weirdly, I make music documentaries
Okay.
at the same time as writing about crime in prisons. So I just finished one about James Blunt.
You're beautiful.
That's it. Can't get away from it.
That was beautiful.
That was, listen, I can't sing. That was all right.
Oh, you can.
No,
I beg to differ.
that's terribly, by the way. But yeah, that's not bad.
So-
take wonder.
One take wonder, very good. I went on tour with James Blunt for a few months. And
This is
filmed him.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very weird. It's very, very different from everything else. There are similarities between touring with James Blunt and being in prison, I have to say, because you're stuck on the tour bus. You're on a bus, and I had more room in my cell
Oh my.
in Wyndham Huge cell in Wandsworth than on James Blunt's bus.
How are you travelling? I thought
You're
you-
a coffin. You're basically sleeping in a coffin, and you're round, and there's lots of, it's all men,
I
and
saw
they just all
your
talk
face.
rubbish and fart
I
all the
thought
time.
you'd be doing business class with James
Well, no, because
Blunt.
you're on a bus. You're on a tour bus.
A
In a
business
crowded
class
place.
bus, no?
Well, I mean, it was quite nice, but it was still tiny bunks.
Yeah.
And you can't leave. You're
I'd
stuck.
never want to see
How
a
many
bunk bed
people?
again.
About sort of 8 to 10. It was like a
Right.
wing.
Bunks.
So when's
Never
this out?
again.
It's out now on Netflix. It's
Oh,
called One Brit
okay.
Wonder. It's just come out on Netflix.
What was the name,
It's-
sorry?
It's called One Brit Wonder.
One
James
Brit
Blunt.
Wonder.
Brit Wonder,
Have a
yeah.
look.
And it's very funny. He's very funny. The film's very funny.
No, you know what? He is funny. I've seen
good
him on a
laugh.
few TV shows. He's
yeah,
funny.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So check that one out.
So, Chris, we've spoken about it a lot throughout this podcast, but you are a massive advocate for change for the criminal justice system.
Yes.
What do you think needs to happen? What's the
God, have you got another hour? I mean,
what's the main thing that you think will help the criminal justice system?
I think that there's a big fallacy at the heart of the criminal justice system and how it's perceived by the public, by politicians, and by the media that is simply this, that if you brutalize prisoners as much as possible, if you treat them as badly as possible, if you make life so unpleasant for them, they'll have this complete transformation and they'll be deterred from ever committing crime again. And the harder you are on them, the more you'll the more you'll cut crime. And that is false on every level. The exact opposite takes place. And the more unpleasant and brutal and degrading the conditions and the treatment of people, the more likely they are to reoffend. And every bit of data out there backs up what I've said. So I think it's if I can make it my life's mission to try and break that fallacy and try and say that actually by more progressive, evidence-based, humane, rational strategies and approaches, you're going to cut crime. You're going to reduce reoffending and stop people coming out and reoffending over and over and over again. And it's not soft justice, and it's not cushy life in prisons or anything like that. It's just what works. In medicine, everything's evidence-based.
Yep.
You don't put a drug on the market unless it's proved to cure people. In prisons, it's almost the exact opposite. We're doing things that we know make people worse, but we do them anyway because of this kind of crazy sort of right-wing, populist, emotionally led attitude that the public has to prisons and prisoners. And it's kind of really pathetic. It's like the only time I get to go on bloody Good Morning Britain is when there's a story in The Sun that someone's got an Xbox.
Yeah.
And they don't get me on to talk about how housing can cut reoffending or the mental health crisis in prisons or what drug treatments work and what don't. It's always this very kind of pathetic, kind of almost teenage, lurid. Oh, they've got an Xbox, you know. And
lads with Sky TV.
Exactly. It's absolutely bonkers, and it drives me mad. But that's sort of where the puerile public obsession is, and it means that things get worse. Yeah. And then guess what? Those same people who are having that puerile debate, they're the first ones to moan when their car gets robbed, quite understandably. But it's like, well, yeah, that guy went to prison 6 times before. And if you'd done something sensible to fix him, he wouldn't have come out and robbed your car. Yeah. And it's to really, that to me is the kernel, the core of what's wrong with this debate and what I want to kind of try and address.
You know, when you said that, we were having a conversation last week, Jules, with someone who used to work in the prison industry but works in a different industry now. And they were saying that, like, it took something happening in someone's personal life, like a crime being committed against someone, for them to realize that, all the time I've been supporting a certain policy, it's really affecting, like, now I'm feeling the effects of that failed policy.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying? So now they've changed their way of
when it
thinking.
happens to you, and hands up, it's the same with me. I was pretty much hang them, shoot them, flog them, you know, before I went away. And now I was away and I was like, oh my God, this is just so counterproductive what we're doing. We're making people worse.
Well, if you ever need more people on board with what you want to do and what you're trying to achieve, we both care about this so much. So
no, it's been a delight talking to you.
Yeah. Yeah, we both agree with what you're saying.
Singing for the same
Keep us in mind, especially for season 3.
I mean,
you're always
you wish.
doing this.
I always say yes. So yeah, no, let's sort it out.
Sorted. Well done.
Thank you very much.
What we like to do at Life After Prison is, you know, highlight an organisation.
Sorry, I know.
No, let's do. We do James.
Please
Blunt.
don't get him
James
to do
Blunt.
it again. Come on.
I saw your. No, I'm not.
Come on, the
do
judge
that.
didn't sentence them to that.
No.
You know, life in prison's bad enough without James Blunt being sung at you.
But so. Like, we like to highlight organisations that have, you know, maybe supported or made a difference in your time in prison or out of prison. Do you have any that you want to shout out?
I do. The big one I always shout out, it's called Storybook Dads, because they were there for me, and it was just a very, very simple but hugely effective scheme they have, where you'd go into a room, a bit like this, just a guy on a microphone, and you read a children's book into their recorder and they send it off. And in those days they did CDs. I think now it's a bit more digital, but they made a special CD of me telling the story, and they put in loads of sound effects and music. And it sounds really cheesy, but it's absolutely wonderful. And they did the snail and the whale.
Wow.
And they sent that to my son. And so he would play it in the car. And he played it and played it and played it. We still got it, but my God, that CD had some wear. Wow. And it was just his way of feeling closer to me through a story. And it's so good what they do. So yeah, Storybook Dads all the way.
Big up Storybook Dads. And to add to that, we have Artbound Foundation, who run a project called Writing Within Walls. And both of these organisations will be in the show notes.
And as you know, we love you guys getting in touch. So please do. Our socials are Insta and X After Prison Pod, and TikTok, which is Life After Prison Pod. You can email us at podcast@prison.radio. And of course, if you're inside, get in touch via National Prison Radio, the usual way. So a massive thank you to Chris for joining us in the studio today.
Thank you very much, homie. It's been brilliant.
Really enjoyed it. Yeah, really enjoyed it.
And a massive thank you to you guys for listening. We'll see you next time.
Don't forget to like, share and subscribe too.